How should you start using KPIs in your business? Well, let's talk about that. First and foremost, let's focus on the business goals. What we really want to do is we want to marry the KPIs that we're selecting with the most important business goals of the company. So, if one of the business goals of the company is profitable revenue growth, then we want to select KPIs that are going to help us understand our revenue growth, the profitability of that revenue growth, and the sustainability of it. If one of our goals is to make sure that we have the right staffing in place for the company that we're trying to run, then we may want to look at things like average pay rates, revenue per head, and different elements like that. But what makes the KPIs most powerful is that linkage to the business goals and really having some hard conversations about what we think those top business goals are. It can be very tempting to measure everything. Once you start collecting data, it seems like there's no end to what you can choose to collect, and then you can use it for KPI on top of KPI. The challenge with that and the risk with that is you have a lot of data and you have a lot of KPIs. They can start to get confusing. They can start to look like they're contradicting each other. And the real reality of it is you simply can't take action on all of the KPIs. There's going to have to be some prioritization. And I believe that the best practice is to prioritize it at the beginning with the business goals and the KPIs selected instead of waiting until you have a whole bunch of KPIs and then trying to choose from them. That is backwards and can lead to some misalignment in terms of how you're selecting your KPIs and the impact that they're going to ultimately have on the company's results. So, the best way to get started after you've done that homework, right? Here's our business goals. Here's the KPIs that we believe mostly align or best align with those business goals, is to make sure that you only have like 3 to 5 KPIs. And once you have those KPIs, that they are a good mix of different measures. Here's an example. Do not pick 3 KPIs that are all measuring revenue growth in a different way. Do not pick 3 KPIs that are all something as a percentage of revenue. That's just going to tell you basically the same information over and over. It's not going to add a lot of depth to your analysis, in other words. So that's really the second step, is making sure that those KPIs not only are aligned with the business goals, but are also providing the most information with the least amount of calculation. So as an example, one of the things that you might want to do instead of the 2 things that I just described is to look at revenue growth year over year in the same period. So as an example, this is especially applicable if you've got companies that are cyclical. You may want to look at this January sales compared to last January sales and just make sure that your growth is consistently on track. And, for some companies, that could be current month to prior month, but if there's any seasonality, that just is asking for trouble when it starts going down. So you just year over year is a good way to look at that. I think gross margin is a really good item to look at if you have direct costs associated with your revenue. The reason is because those costs are generally much more directly related to the revenue generation in the same time frame. It's relative to what's being sold and what's being paid for. Indirect costs or overhead costs don't necessarily have that same relationship to revenue. And those calculations can be a little misleading because a lot of the overhead costs are fixed. And what's really driving the variation is the fact that revenue is moving up and down. So I would definitely look at that. I think revenue per head is a great thing to consider. It helps you understand whether your staffing is efficient and effective for the revenue that's being generated, and that is a total headcount number. So if you have found that your staff has increased over the past year from say 50 to 60, but your revenue is not going up, then your average revenue per head is going to be declining. That may be temporary. There's oftentimes where companies need to hire in advance, but it's certainly something to keep in mind. And if it goes on for too long, then there's been some sort of an issue in the staffing decisions that have been made. Other things to look at might be productivity measures, especially for any sort of direct labor. You might want to look at overtime if that's an issue for your company. Overtime hours are significantly more expensive than regular hours are. And really looking at how you can make those things work together. The other thing that you want to do when you're selecting your KPIs is make sure that your mix of KPIs keeps you out of trouble. Example, people will do what they're incented to do. And that means that if you have a commissioned sales team, they're going to make decisions about the customers that they seek out and the sales that they close based on their commission structure. That may result in great revenue and not the best profitability, depending upon how that commission plan has been set up. So you'll want to look at your revenue growth. That's what you're trying to incent your sales team to do, is to grow revenue. You also want to have some sort of a KPI that is measuring the cost, the incremental cost to that revenue that's being generated, and making sure that those things aren't getting out of line. It can be very tempting to celebrate all the top line growth and then miss the fact that it is the business that's been added is a lot less profitable than the business that used to be coming in the door. So having those checks and balances inside your KPIs can be very, very useful, so that you're not making decisions based just on one or even on a group that are all pointing in the same direction. So we want to have a balance with those KPIs. The last thing that a company needs to do, as they're getting started with KPIs is, for goodness sakes, keep everything current. It's very easy to get behind on monthly financial statements, particularly if you've got a lot of change happening inside the company. Financial statements often are very backward looking. Even in the best of cases, if you're getting the financial statements done in the first 3 days of the month, that information is still, 2-3 weeks outdated in the eyes of the team that's running the company on a day-to-day basis. Now, those financial statements are important for a lot of different reasons. They should also confirm what is happening. Like, it can feel busy, and yet there's nothing in the financial statements that would tell you that it's busy. So there's things like that that are definitely important. But the other thing is that all of these KPIs, whether they're calculated on a monthly basis or a weekly basis or whatever basis, are based up on timely and accurate data. And so ensuring that the systems that are providing that information are updated currently, accurately, timely, reviewed. That's certainly something that the financial statements can also help you do, is critical. And frankly, you just can't run a business without good data. And those are the elements that are super important. So it's really important to have those foundational things in place, right? Your currently financial information, your business goals, so you know what KPIs to select to measure against those business goals, and any of that other critical infrastructure information that you want to have. You don't want the KPIs to become a project all on their own. So having those foundational elements in place and then aligning your KPI selection to the goals and to the availability of the data is going to be the best place to get started and really ensure that you start using KPIs on a long-term basis. So let me know if you have been using KPIs or if this video has nudged you along that path in the comments below, and also be sure to subscribe to our channel.